Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. Welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. My name is Connor Philby, and it was a very exciting week of NFL action for Week 1. And we're going through the picks I made to start off this week, the predictions I made, and I got a good deal wrong, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it, so we'll go over that. But this is kind of just a whole video breaking down Week 1 of all the action that happened and all the amazing storylines, and it was just a lot of excitement, and I was thankfully able to watch basically 10 hours of football all whole day long. So shout out to my amazing fiance for sitting there with me and watching me, indulge in my biggest, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's definitely an obsession. So thank you to her for enabling that. Anyway, as I was kind of watching some of the games, and I went back and I looked at all the highlights of the ones that I wasn't able to watch as closely, and I followed all of them throughout the day. So I kind of just put together some thoughts about every game in note form here. But as we go through here, we're going to just also look at my predictions and see how right or wrong I was. And I'm going to be doing this every single week because I want to make sure I hold myself accountable for these picks so that when you hear me make a pick for next week, you'll know I get to come back and watch him either gloat about it or just kind of, either make excuses or own it. And I'm going to try and own it any way I can. But we're going to start things off with one I actually got right, and in flying colors I got right. The Bills defeat the Rams 31-10. And this one was a game. I'm a Bills fan. I'm not like a diehard Bills fan because I always make sure that in every sport I only root for the Minnesota teams. I'm not one of those guys that can be fans of two teams at the same time. And if anyone out there says they're a fan of two teams, stop it. You're a fan of one and you're a side fan of others. So I'm a side fan of the Bills. And I think the reasoning is because it's such a sad franchise, just like the Vikings. But not just that. Not only am I rooting for another team like the Vikings to finally get their first Super Bowl, also their fans are just some of the best they're the best fan base in professional sports, in my opinion. There's no fan base that comes anywhere close to them in the way they cheer for their team through thick and thin when they suck and when they don't. And just the way that they give money to charity through different players and everything. They're just amazing fans. So that's another reason I'm a Bills fan. But anyway, it looked like a great game for them all throughout. They're definitely my Super Bowl favorites for sure as of right now. Obviously, we have a whole season left to go, and obviously plenty of things can happen. So all these speculations, I'm not going to try and jump to too many conclusions. But that one I can jump to. I have the Bills as my Super Bowl favorite after Week 1, and I'm sure many others will be too. They bounced back from kind of a slow start. Both teams it was kind of a defensive game to start things out, and I was thinking, man, these two teams are the least teams that I would expect to start the season off defensively. But then they really got their mojo back. Josh Allen had more rushing yards than the running back room did the entire game, which isn't really even a knock against the running backs. It's just the narrative of this game never really ended up needing any running backs to really do anything special. They just needed to come up big when it mattered and when it was important, and they did that. But Josh Allen runs for more yards than the running backs. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis both looked great, had good both statistical and clutch outings for them. Eventually, there really was no need to be clutch when you're up by 21. But then there was a great Bills debut for Von Miller, who was in the Bills uniform for his very first time, which is what a debut is. And he looked fantastic, got a couple sacks on Matthew Stafford, and he really came out with a vengeance and wanted to prove that he still has it and he's not just washed up. And it is difficult for a guy to come onto a brand new team like that right away and prove himself, and he did just that. So great game for him. On top of that, the Rams started off slow and they just never were able to pick up speed, and they were never able to keep up with this Bills offense. But I would not give up on them quite yet, because this kind of happened throughout the season with the Rams last year. When you get all these big names and big star power together, sometimes it takes a while to get the mojo going. Sometimes you start slow, and we saw this exact same Rams team kind of falter a little bit, kind of maybe midway through the season last year. But with these teams, there's a lot of progress that can be made throughout the season, a lot of ways that you can really overcome these things. Young teams have trouble overcoming tough early season losses like this, but a lot of smart veteran guys on that team, I think they can probably figure things out and turn that around. So I had a W for that one. I got that one right. And then next we had Saints 27, Falcons 26. So this was a game that I also got right, although I was really thinking I was going to be wrong about this one all the way through that game. But what can you say? The Falcons are going to be the Falcons. I was rooting for the Falcons throughout that game because as a Vikings fan, I hate the Saints. But at the very least, I got my prediction right. So the Falcons be the Falcons. They gave up. Man, the Saints scored 17 points in the fourth quarter, which is just insane. Winston actually had a pretty impressive fourth quarter. He started off slow, but a lot of these games, like I'll be saying, started off really slow offensively, and then it really picked up along the way. But in this game, it was no different. Winston started off slow, but had a really impressive fourth quarter. And on top of that, he didn't throw a single interception all game, which is something that I had a lot of concerns about going into the season if I was a Saints fan. And that was the reason why I predicted them to not make the playoffs this year. And if Winston can cut back on the interceptions and play clutch like that in the fourth quarter, the Saints still could be dangerous this year. So we're going to have to see what happened. But Taysom Hill had more rushing yards than Alvin Kamara, which is either just a kind of fluke game where the Saints found themselves behind early and had to come back and pass and never really gave Kamara an opportunity, or it could be kind of concerning for Kamara fantasy owners. Maybe they're kind of starting to phase him out of the offense a little bit more. Maybe he doesn't have it anymore, and I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying these are the things that go through your mind when you make all these reckless speculations at the beginning of the season. That's a narrative we're going to have to see going forward. 49ers 10, Bears 19. This is one that I got wrong. And this is just a game that I don't want to read into too much, to be honest. It was a weird game. Weather was crazy. You saw the players literally sopping wet. I don't use sopping a whole lot because I don't like that word. But in this scenario, they were sopping wet. And they were just trudging through. They literally had to put the graphics of the field, like almost like a light show looking thing, as graphics on the field for the fans watching at home so that you could even see where the lines were because it just got so messed up. So I don't really want to say, oh, the 49ers did this wrong or whatever. It was just a tough game for both sides to have to deal with, and the weather was just crazy, and I think this is a game that both teams, obviously the Bears want to see this as, oh yeah, we outplayed the opponent. The 49ers can just look at this game as, you know what, the weather was weird. Let's just see what happens next week and not really worry about it too much. I think that'll play to their advantage mentally as they look back at this game, and they can make a whole lot of excuses for themselves, which is nice. But it was still kind of surprising that the Bears were able to outplay the 49ers in the running game because with all this going on, there was no passing. It was non-existent. They combined for the quarterbacks for each team combined for 284 yards total amongst the two of them. So it was really a rushing type game. The Bears ended up winning the battle, and what can you say? The Bears won a game, and I expected them to only win 2 or 3 this year, so maybe they'll win more than I expected, but I definitely got that one wrong. So, next we've got the Steelers at the Bengals, and the Steelers won that one 23-20. I got that one wrong as well. I thought the Bengals would win this one easily, but it's like I said, sometimes you come stumbling out of the gate when you lose a Super Bowl, and you have that Super Bowl hangover, and sometimes it lasts the whole season. Sometimes you just start off slow and then get back to your mojo. We'll have to see what happens with the Bengals, but they had a pretty rough game. Burrow, statistically, you could say, oh, he threw for a lot of yards, but they just couldn't get it done in the red zone, first off. And second off, a lot of turnovers. Burrow threw multiple interceptions, gave up a couple fumbles. It was kind of a rough game for him, and just the entire Bengals offense. You have to come up clutch in those big moments near the end of the game. And McPherson had the first really rough game of his career since he had that rough one against the Packers last year. Ever since that game, he was lights out up until this moment where he missed multiple field goals, including the extra point that would have won the game for the Bengals. And it ends up coming back to bite them, and they lose in overtime to the Steelers. But Trubisky, I will say, was very impressive. He delivered at least what he was expected to deliver. Everyone knows Trubisky's not going to be he's not going to light up the defense. He's not going to make a bunch of big plays and be this dynamic quarterback. But with the defense the Steelers have, and the rushing attack and what they're able to do and all other sides of the ball, all the Steelers really need to do is bring in a quarterback like Trubisky who can kind of just be enough to lead the Steelers to victory, and that's exactly what he did. Although TJ Watt with an injury that looks like he avoided a significant one. It didn't look good with a torn pec, but we'll have to see what happens. He might have avoided something really bad, but we'll have to see what happens there. So that was kind of another weird game I didn't expect. The Eagles also win 38-35, which is one that I got right, but man, was it close. And it's exactly what I said. The Lions are a gritty team, and you can never relax and take your foot off the gas against this team. They will make you pay for it. They might not be the best, most talented team on the field, but they are going to fight for every single yard, and they are not going to give in under any circumstances. And that kind of mentality can result in a kind of a team that is more dangerous than you'd think. A team kind of like the Broncos were a couple years ago, where they only won 5-6 games all season, but man, were they a headache to a lot of good teams. And that could be this way for the Lions this year. The Eagles had a pretty good day offensively, obviously scoring 38. Miles Sanders had a good game. The whole rushing attack for the Eagles had a great game. And then A.J. Brown with a tremendous debut for the Eagles. And again, this is going to be the matchup the Vikings have next week, so that should be a really good game, and we'll have to see where that goes. But I got that one right. Again, watch out for the Lions. Do not underestimate them. They are kind of putting the league on watch, where watch out for this team. There's a lot of guys you don't know about that are going to come out onto the scene and just fight for every inch. So I'm excited to watch the Lions this year. Even if they don't win enough games for the playoffs, they should be fun to watch. Patriots 7, Dolphins 20. I got this one right as well. This is one where I was like, I wasn't sure about Tua. He wasn't going to put up elite yards no matter what, but I was thinking, man, if he puts up 150 yards and 2 interceptions, it completely tanks the Dolphins' season right from the get-go, because they have a good defense, but not good enough where it is, going to carry Tua. Like last year, they almost made the playoffs, but again, they couldn't carry Tua far enough. So that being said, Tua actually looked pretty good in this game. 270 yards, 1 TD, and most importantly, no interceptions. It wasn't a Tua turn the ball over kind of day for them. 98 receiving yards for Tyreek Hill. It was a good day all around. And Mac Jones and the Patriots offense looked just about as disjointed as a bunch of analysts were saying in the preseason. And they were just all through and through underwhelming. So we'll have to see if they can turn it around. But man, it didn't look good for them, which, kind of happy to see, because I'm one of those guys that, being a fan of the Vikings, I like to see teams win for the first time, or teams that haven't won it in a long time win it. So I always tend to not like rooting for those teams that win it all the time. So it's good for me anyway. Ravens 24, Jets 9. I got this one right, but that's not that much of a victory, as this one was very expected. The Ravens did what they needed to do. That's all you can really say. And then they ended up sitting on the lead. The defense was able to get the job done. If they had gone full throttle this whole game, they probably could have scored 40-plus against the Jets. But they did what they needed to do, and they just gave up. They didn't give up, you know what I'm saying. They did what they needed to do, sat on the lead, and that was end of it. Offensively, they were just very effective. Flacco was effective on paper, but how do you throw for 307 yards and only get 9 points the whole game? It's just a complete inability to deliver in big moments, inability to deliver in the red zone, and that's what killed the Jets and Joe Flacco today, as well as their defense. Just besides Sauce looking pretty good in his opening debut with the Jets, the rest of it really did not look too great. Jaguars 22, Commanders 28. This is one I had wrong. I predicted the Jaguars to get the quasi upset, and they didn't do it. Lawrence actually looked pretty decent, but in the moment where he needed to come up clutch for the team, he didn't quite get it done, although he didn't exactly have a whole lot of help. The Jaguars showed flashes of being kind of a better team, and I'm guessing they'll win a few more games than they did last year, but they just, Wentz actually threw for 4 TDs, which was really surprising. And the Jaguars defense just couldn't quite do enough to get this win. So Commanders improved to 1-0, which is something that I didn't expect to see at this point. Browns 26, Panthers 24. Where was Christian McCaffrey? I mean, seriously, Christian McCaffrey was basically non-existent in this game. And it was just kind of one of those situations where it's like a Titans deal where you need to have Derrick Henry going crazy if they're going to win a game, and I'll get to that in just a second. But they needed McCaffrey to come out here and go crazy, and where was he? He ran for 10 carries, 33 yards. There just was never anything for him all game long. His longest rush was 9 yards, and that's just completely unlike Christian McCaffrey. Obviously not, it's too early to pump the emergency brakes on Christian McCaffrey. He's still going to come back in other games and ball out, but I think the Panthers are getting to a point where they're like, okay, we're going to need Baker to really come up in the big moments here, because we're not going to be able to rely on Christian McCaffrey for the type of production he gets most games, because you can't just say, oh, well, if McCaffrey doesn't do well, we're toast. If you're trying to develop a winning team, that's just not how it's going to work out. Jacoby Brissett didn't really need to do anything to win this game, and he sure didn't. Threw for only 147 yards on 18 attempts, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. So Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt really carried this entire game. A total of 217 rushing yards for this Cleveland team, and everyone knew at this point that the best running team in this game was going to win, and that's exactly what happened. Browns win, and I get that prediction wrong. I wanted the Panthers, predicted the Panthers, and didn't get it right. So we got the Colts now and the Texans. Obviously, this one was a push. I predicted the Colts to tie or to win, and they tied, but it kind of feels like a loss because, man, how do you even tie against the Texans? I will say Davis Mills looked pretty good. 240 yards with 2 TDs and so few weapons is actually pretty impressive. So he's developing pretty well. And the stats behind the Colts made it very hard to believe this final score. Let's take a look at these final stats, shall we? Jonathan Taylor runs for 161 yards and a touchdown on 31 carries, which is an insane amount of carries, and that's going to get a running back hurt eventually. And then we have Matt Ryan throwing for 352 yards and only 1 interception. Tell me how that results in just 20 points. I just don't understand. They had a total of 352 yards receiving, 177 yards rushing, and they only put up 20 points. That is just unbelievable to me. It's just, again, you got to make things happen in the red zone, and they didn't do it. And again, a tie to the Texans feels like a loss in my book. And obviously, thankfully, they're in the division that they're in, the AFC South. So they still have a chance, but man, is that embarrassing. Next, we have the Titans and the Giants, where the Giants win 21-20. I will say that was a really nice, gutsy call by Dable there in his first game as a head coach for the Giants. I think that a team that's contending for playoffs, that might be a little too risky to do in that situation. But with the Giants wanting to make a big statement win and start getting some momentum, I think the Giants are going to have to win 5-6 games this year for them to be able to get some positive momentum and get some players to want to join that team, because it just gets really difficult to get players to sign with you when you just have nothing going. So it would be great for that team to start developing a winning culture again, and these big risks make players want to play for a coach like this that believes in their team so much. So I like that decision. Is Saquon Barkley back? He had a really good game for the Giants, and he got the game-winning point after, or 2 points after, and he came up clutch in that moment. 164 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked good, and Daniel Jones didn't look great, didn't even get 200 yards, but he threw those 2 TDs, and he came up when it counts. So there's not much you can say about that. I personally still think this is Daniel Jones' last year with the Giants. He's going to have to play a lot better in the weeks ahead than he did in week 1. But at the end of the day, the Giants come away with the win, and I sure got that pick wrong. I had a lot more faith in the Titans than I should have, because at this point, when Derrick Henry is not putting up 200 yards, the Titans are toast. And they're going to have to figure out a way to start developing the passing attack a lot more, because even as good as Derrick Henry is, people are going to figure out how to stop this run if you have nothing going for you on the passing side of the ball. Packers, Vikings, I got that one right. I'm not going to talk about that one too much, because I did do a raw reaction to that at the end of the game, but it was a great game for the Vikings. What I loved the most about it, which is what I said in this raw reaction I did, I loved how our defense was able to come up big in those moments. 4th down, a situation where last year we would have let them run all over us, especially Aaron Rodgers. We were able to lock it down, and we never let the Packers come back by any means. It was a little nerve-wracking at one point. It was 23-7 and the Packers were driving. There's still a whole quarter to go. And I was thinking, could this be it? But it wasn't. The Vikings defense held strong, and I was really impressed by that. And it was exciting to finally see a team that can do that. On top of the fact that Justin Jefferson is just insane, and Kirk Cousins played great. Delvin Cook played great. And we leaned on him a little bit more in the second half, and he delivered. So offense looked really impressive, and I'm excited to see what happens going forward. Big game against the Eagles this week that I will break down later in the week as we get closer to it. But I did get that pick right, so exciting that I got that one right. Usually when I pick the Vikings, it doesn't go too well, so got to feel good about that. Chiefs destroy the Cardinals. They destroy the Cardinals in a game that I did pick. Did I pick the Chiefs? I did pick the Chiefs. I remember saying that I was going to pick the Chiefs, but I was like, don't sleep on the Cardinals. And now today comes and everyone's like, and completely sleeping on the Cardinals, because, man, did they play very meh in this game. Obviously, I'm not going to take anything away from what Patrick Mahomes did. He threw 5 touchdowns, 360 yards total, not a single interception, a QB rating of 94. He played fantastic. Kyler Murray did not play fantastic, and this passing attack just didn't do well. On top of that, they just could not run the ball. Besides Kyler Murray and Trace McSorley getting a few runs in there, the backup quarterback, if you just combine the 2 running backs, they only got 54 yards total. Greg Dortch was the leading receiver for Arizona with 63. And I think when I predicted the Cardinals to be a sleeper team, I just didn't realize how few targets they really had. I was thinking, man, they'll get Hopkins back, and maybe they'll still be better when they get him back. But I just didn't realize how devoid of talent this receiving core is, and Kyler Murray is going to have to do a whole lot to get his team back on track. to win enough games where once Hopkins comes back, they can still compete. It's going to be tough sledding for them if they have to continue to go with what little weapons they have. On top of that, no Tyreek Hill, no problem for Patrick Mahomes. We'll see if that comes back to bite him later in the season, but it definitely wasn't a problem against the Cardinals. 2 more games here. Buccaneers win 19-3 against the Cowboys. And as soon as the game ended, I immediately ran to Instagram to see what Stephen A. had cooking, and it was worth it. If you don't know, Stephen A. always is against the Cowboys, always predicts them to lose, and anytime people predict him to win and they lose bitterly, he posts a video of him just laughing hysterically on Instagram, and it's the best. And this was no different. He did the same thing. The Cowboys defense looked pretty good, but they got absolutely no help. And the Buccaneers, really, they were kind of slow the whole game. They were kind of off their A game this game, and if certain teams that were better equipped to take advantage of that might have been able to win this game, but the Cowboys had every opportunity to get back into it, and they just didn't deliver. Prescott did get hurt late, so hopefully he is not hurt for long term. He seems like a good guy. And then a good rushing attack for the Bucs, and that was what kind of saved them in this game, because the passing attack was not nearly as good as we've seen it in the past, but again, could just be a slow start, and when you get the win, it doesn't really matter. You can keep working on it and go from there. But man, a very lackluster running attack from the Cowboys, and that eventually came back to bite them. They couldn't establish the run, which means they couldn't establish the pass, and nothing ended up working out for the Cowboys. And they're the only team in the entire NFL to start off the season that didn't get a touchdown last week. So more shame on them for that. Finally, we have the Broncos and the Seahawks, and I'm just going to step aside here real quick from talking about the game itself and a quick rant about the Seahawks fan base. So Russell Wilson, I understand, requests a trade from the team. Of course, he was getting screwed over by the team, so that's not even something to get mad about. But anyway, if you're mad, I understand he walked away from the team, he asked to be traded. That does not matter. This is a quarterback that came into this city, immediately dedicated himself to the city, did charity work for the city, did all these things, and then goes on the field, wins you more games than any quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks ever has before, takes you to 2 Super Bowls, wins you one of them, and then again, gives everything to the team, everything to the city, leaves, regardless of how it happened, regardless of how messy it was, requests to be traded, gets traded to the Broncos, comes back, and is booed relentlessly all game long. I understand you have to be loud, and that's not what I'm saying. He was booed by those same fans after everything he did for them and gave them. All the charity work, everything. I think that is just absolutely ridiculous. I think that any Seahawks fan that booed him should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm going to go as far as to say that I am hoping the Seahawks do not have a winning team for a long time, and that Seahawks fans do not get to watch a good Seahawks team for a long time because of what they did. Right there. And I understand it wasn't every Seahawks fan. Most Seahawks fans were probably fine. But the fact that it was an entire stadium's worth is even embarrassing. And that made me mad. It made me want to see Russ absolutely destroy the Seahawks. Unfortunately, he didn't. But I had to say that because that genuinely made me angry. Anyway, Broncos defense looked solid at times. And then other times they'd give up these random big plays. I remember that one play where Geno Smith did a good job getting out of pressure, and then he lobbed it up, and there was absolutely no one there for the receiver to grab it and easily run into the end zone. So they looked good at times and then really disorganized and just off the mark at other times, and it came back to bite them. And on the offensive side of the ball, Wilson threw for 340 yards, but the Broncos offense just couldn't find a way to get it into the end zone. They did get a good deep pass to Jerry Jeudy for 60-plus yards and a touchdown, which was their only big impact play of the game, unfortunately. So it didn't look great for the offense to start things off, and I think they have a lot of timing things, a lot of chemistry things they need to work through, which will happen when you get a new quarterback coming from a new team, from a different team, and having to start over fresh with new offense and everything. All that's going to result in some things that are off to start the season, so we'll have to see. But Nathaniel Hackett, I think, made a horrible decision, and he did own up to this. Later, when he was asked questions, he did say, yeah, I think I would have done it differently. But you have Russell Wilson, who, yes, he was struggling throughout the game to get that big first down, to get those big yards. But it doesn't matter what happened the rest of the game. At the time, it would have been 50 seconds or 40 seconds or something like that. But they ended up running the clock down, so they weren't able to do that. But you have 50 seconds left on the clock, and you have a 4th and 5, and you have Russell Wilson, who, yes, like I said, it didn't do great the whole rest of the game coming up clutch. But this is his moment. This is a Russell Wilson vintage moment where he could have had a horrible game the entire rest of the time. We've seen it all throughout the past in primetime situations like this. This is Russell Wilson's moment to drop back, find a guy, and get the first down, get into field goal range. He didn't need to get a touchdown. He just needed to get into field goal range, which would have been maybe 20 more yards. And you're going to trot out McManus, who is a great kicker, fantastic kicker, and is kind of on the edge for Hall of Fame, honestly. And I get that he's kicked some crazy long ones in the past, but you're in Seattle. There's wind. It's not perfect weather. If you're indoors, maybe, but I don't understand the decision. You pay how much money to Russell Wilson before this game starts, and you give up multiple first-round picks in the offseason to get this guy, and then you're going to just not trust him in this big moment. I just don't quite get it, and I think that was a really bad decision on the Broncos' part. But at the end of the day, at least Nathaniel Hackett now admitted, I didn't make the right call there, and he's learning from it, and next time he'll trust Russell Wilson more, and maybe they'll have a better game next time, but we'll have to see what happens. That being said, those were all the matchups for Week 1. At the end of the day, I came out at 9-6-1 for my predictions, so decent but not great. And I'm just going to keep a running total of that throughout the season, and hopefully I'll at least be above 500, but we'll have to see how that goes. My next video is going to be a prediction video for Week 2 and what's going to happen there. But because that most likely is not going to be until Friday or Saturday, I'm just going to really quickly make a prediction for the Chargers and Chiefs game that's going to be this Thursday, which will be tomorrow for when this is uploaded. And this should be a really good game. It's going to be at Kansas City, and I don't have an upset of the week thing yet. I'm going to start that Week 4 or 5 because, like I've been saying, I don't think it really makes much sense to have an upset of the week before we really even know what an upset is. We don't have a feel for these teams yet. So I'm not going to say this is an upset of the week yet, but I am going to say the Chargers are going to shock the world. And while people do think they are a good team, I don't think that many people are going to pick them to beat the Chiefs, especially in an away game. But I am going to do it. I think that the Chiefs and the Chargers have been a really good matchup throughout the last few years. I think that the Chargers have a way of getting the upper hand of the Chiefs in these moments. And last year, they ended up beating the Chiefs at home. And I think they're going to do it again. I think that Justin Herbert is finally in the headspace where he can be, that quarterback that comes up in the clutch, that can really be a true team leader. And I think that's going to really show in this game. I think that they have some good offensive matchups. We're going to have to see how healthy Keenan Allen is. But I think if they can get Austin Eckler going and they can get off to an early start, I think they can potentially win against this Chiefs team that's kind of flying high and a little cocky after winning against the Cardinals. So that's my pick. Chargers get the win. but I will give you all the rest of my predictions for week 2, most likely on Friday. If not, it'll be Saturday. And then I'll also do a separate video completely breaking down the Vikings at Eagles matchup and do kind of a predictions kind of thing there. So thanks for watching this one. I hope you really like it. Again, make sure that you subscribe and like this video to let me know that you like my content. Make sure you leave a comment if there's anything you want me to talk about specifically, any other ideas you have for me, and I'm happy to do them and answer any questions you have. And also make sure you follow my Instagram and my TikTok, which I will leave in the description of this video. So thanks again, and I'll see you on the flip side.